Debbie Herbeck.
Yeah. Rachel gave away all my deep, dark secrets. Okay. Hey everyone, how you doing? Good. All right. I feel so, I don't know.
Yeah, that's right.
Usually things slide off of it.
What?
They usually slide off of it.
Yeah, no, there's a little ledge.
Okay.
So, all right, ladies. Good to see you all. Bree, it's great to see you. Thanks for coming. I want to do something tonight that you don't often hear. So I think I know many of you, but I realize that many of you don't know much of me. And I know that you, tell me what you know about me, okay? So I'm just going to give you a little quiz to start out, and then I'll just cut those parts out of my story. No, not really. So what do you know about me?
Oh, you were raised Jewish.
I was raised in a Jewish home. Yep, we'll get to that. I despise peanut butter. Yes.
Really cool.
Really cool, obviously. Thank you. Thank you. Catherine?
You went to the University of Michigan.
I went to Michigan. Go blue.
Your favorite saint, Mother Teresa.
My favorite saint is Mother Teresa. Yes. Leah?
Like dark purple.
Dark purple. I think that was discerned at a Bible study together when I wasn't there. Yeah, Claire?
You know Sister Sarah Burdick.
I know Sister Sarah Burdick. Yep. Elizabeth?
You're allergic to broccoli.
I'm allergic to broccoli and cilantro. Anything else? All right. Yeah, one more.
You're married to Peter Herbeck.
I'm married to Peter Herbeck, yes. So, yeah, and you see me in one particular light. You don't see me in my personal life. You don't see me before BLR began or even before Pine Hills began. But I want to take a step back in time, and I want to share with you probably the most important decision of my whole life. How I got here, why I'm doing what I'm doing. And the main point isn't just to say, you know, God gave me this great story, look at me. It's to say to each one of you that God can work in so many miraculous ways. And the biggest thing on God's heart is that you would know His love and that you would encounter Him personally. And so tonight isn't about all this head knowledge. I'm not going to quote the Catechism. Sorry. I'm not going to talk about Mother Teresa, even though you know that I love her. I'm going to talk about my own personal encounter with Jesus. That was a spoiler alert. That happened. I'm going to talk about it. But I'm going to talk about why what we're doing matters. Okay? And this is my love story. Okay? And I'm not going to talk about Peter. So he's part of it, but he's not the main character in my love story. So I want to start out by telling you all that I grew up in a Jewish home, and one of the more remarkable things about me, which I always took for granted, was that I am an identical twin. Are there any other twins in the crowd? No? Wow. Okay. So I'm going to show you a couple pictures here of me as a little one, and see if you can figure out who's who. So the scary thing is I don't even know who I am in this picture. So can somebody please tell me? What do you think? All right, let's do it. How many people think this is me? Wow, overwhelming. Elizabeth? How about this one?
Oh, one person.
Eliana thinks that's one. I think it's this one, but I honestly don't even know. When I was little, my grandfather used to say to my sister and I, "Are you or your sister?" And I was like, is that a trick question? I'm not sure. So I'm not sure here, but this was my sister and I when we were very little, probably under 2, and as you can see, back then twins was kind of a novelty, and my mom used to dress us the same, actually until we put our foot down in middle school. So we'd like a little independence from you and from one another. So this is us at 2. I think is there one more of me as a little girl?
There's one you as a little girl, and then there's another twin picture, but you're older.
Yeah, let's do me as a little girl.
Aww.
definitely my model pose. Then one more of my sister and I, not just as little girls.
There's also one more of you like middle school age, and then twins.
Okay, we'll wait on those two until we get into the story. So you can
Take it down.
take it down, please, as you're just gazing upon me. So I grew up in a suburb north of Chicago in a Jewish home with Jewish parents, with Jewish grandparents, with Jewish relatives, with Jewish friends, with Jewish schoolmates, and everyone that I knew was Jewish. That was my world. I didn't know Catholics, I didn't know Christians, I didn't know Buddhists, I didn't know Muslims, I knew Jews. And so that meant when I was little, growing up, I thought everyone in the world was Jewish. And maybe you experienced that growing up Catholic, before your world got widened a little bit. I didn't know anything about Jesus because I grew up in a very kind of insulated Jewish family. This was before the World Wide Web, so I couldn't just go look up world religions on my own. And from a very early age, we got a message from our grandparents as they talked and taught us about our faith is that whatever Christianity was, it was off limits to us. That the Jews had always been persecuted, especially by the Christian religion, and in order to maintain our Jewish identity, we needed to kind of be separate from other religions, but in particular by the Christian world. And so that was a message, not like a hateful message against Christians. It was just like, we're Jews, and the Gentile world, or the nations, if you've been coming to Bible study, are out there. And so I grew up being very proud to be Jewish. That's all I knew. And for me, Judaism was, me being Jewish wasn't just my religion, it was my identity, it was my culture, it was my, almost like my nationality and my ethnicity, all rolled into one. And so I had a very keen sense of what that meant to be a Jewish young woman. My grandparents on my dad's side were very involved with helping Israel become a state long before I was born. And so they knew a lot of the people that founded the state of Israel. So just want to give you a sense of what my life was like growing up Jewish. We celebrated all the Jewish holidays. We celebrated Hanukkah. We didn't have a Christmas tree. We didn't have a Hanukkah bush. We celebrated the Jewish holidays. And so I thought that was great. So I grew up in a family of 4. I have an identical twin sister who you saw. Her name is Dana. I had an older brother, Mark, who was 2 years older, and then a younger brother, David, who's 4 years younger. And had a lot of religious training. I started learning Hebrew when I was 3 years old, and my first prayer I ever learned was in Hebrew. Do you want to hear it? Yes, okay. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Very short part of Hero Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. And then it goes on to more. That's what little Jewish kids learn when they're first learning Hebrew and learning how to pray. But I started going to Hebrew school and to Saturday school, kind of like Sunday school, learning about what the Old Testament stories were and learning how to read Hebrew and how to write Hebrew and how to chant and speak in Hebrew. I would say God was part of my life in so much as God was part of the Jewish people, but I didn't know him personally. I didn't even know that I could know him personally. I thought God is part of the Old Testament, and the Old Testament is really old, and those are stories that happened a long time ago, but God doesn't feel personal to my own life. And honestly, I don't know if you can relate to this part, but I didn't really feel like I had a need for God in my life. I grew up in a upper middle class family. We went on really nice vacations. I had everything that I thought I needed. When I was 13, my sister and I made our bar mitzvah. How many of you know what a bar mitzvah is? Anybody? Okay, so for those of you who don't know, it's a lot like confirmation, except instead of doing it with your whole class, you do it with one other person. You study for a whole year, and they give you this part out of the Torah that you need to learn how to chant and memorize. And so that day comes, my sister and I, on a Saturday, early evening, we're dressed in these beautiful dresses. Do you have a picture of that? This is me on my bat mitzvah day. I also had braces, but see my lovely dress and my braces. But we stood up together in front of the whole congregation, family and friends, and we read out of the Torah and chanted, and then gave a speech about why it was so important that we were Jewish. And then came the party at a very fancy hotel, and people brought us gifts and money, and we were kind of the stars of the show for the night. It was very memorable. And then the day ended, and I thought, I'm done. I don't need to go to religious school anymore. A little bit like sometimes we think about confirmation, even though we shouldn't. But it was very clear, talking to my parents, especially my dad, that that's not what it meant to be Jewish. To be Jewish meant that you continued to pursue your understanding and your knowledge of God. Okay, you can take me at 13 down. So I'm going to fast forward a little bit. Went through middle school, and I was very athletic, played a lot of sports, did well in school, and then went to our local high school, which was huge, and it was probably 80% Jewish. And the Jewish kids and the Italian kids were kind of in separate friend groups, I guess you could say. But my graduating class in high school was, I think, 700 kids. And it was a college prep, high school, public high school for Jewish kids. And so, again, played a lot of sports, played softball and basketball and tennis in high school. And when my sister and I were sophomores in high school, we were 15, my brother, by this time, Mark, was a freshman in college. And my sister and my brother and I, the three oldest, were invited over Christmas break to go on a family trip with our very rich aunt and uncle. They had a house on an island in the Bahamas, a second home. Hey, Rach. Okay. And Rach could tell this story with her eyes closed. She's heard it so many times. So, and they invited us to come and spend part of Christmas break with them. And so we were super excited to go. And my sister and I flew to Miami from Chicago, and my brother was going to meet us in Miami a little bit later because he had some finals to take at school. He was a couple hours away from Chicago. And we got to that airport in Miami, and our friends were there to meet us, my family friends, which was unexpected. And they said, we have some news. We don't exactly know what's going on, but your brother Mark was on his way home, on his way to the airport from school, and was in a car accident. And so your parents want you to come back to our house so we figure out what the next steps are and figure out what's going on with your brother. So they took us back to their house, and by this time it was beginning to be dark. It was nighttime, and I remember standing outside. It was Florida, so they had a built-in swimming pool outside, and I remember doing something I'd never done before in my life. I prayed. Now, I had said lots of prayers. You guys know the difference between saying prayers and praying? Yes. So I'd said lots of prayers. I knew lots of prayers in Hebrew, but this was my first time ever trying to really talk to God, because now I needed him. I remember standing by that pool and saying, God, I don't know what's going on in my family right now. I don't know if you can hear me or if you even care. But God, if you're real, save my brother's life. And I just prayed that prayer really, honestly, in desperation. I didn't know who I was praying to or what would happen. And a few minutes later, the phone rang in the house, and my mom's friend came out and said, your brother was coming home, going to the airport, driving on a two-lane snowy highway, and he was run off the road by a semi-truck. And he wasn't wearing a seatbelt. And he died on a stretcher in the hospital before my parents could even get to him. I was your age. So you can imagine all the emotions running through me, but the one that's remember distinctly was turning back to God and saying, God, where are you? If you really cared about our family, you could have saved his life. And in some way, in my own grief and my pain, I kind of decided in that moment that either God was going to be real and I was going to find him, or he didn't care at all and I was going to live my life the way I wanted to. And so I got on a plane, my sister and I, the next day, and we went back to Chicago, To our grieving family, my parents who didn't have a perspective or a vision for eternal life, didn't know how to care for us, and we were all kind of just on our own. People came to the house to bring food and to pray with us for two days straight. And I remember walking around to different people who were there in the house, and just all these questions pouring out of me, like, where is God? Why does God allow bad things to happen to good people? What happens when we die? And every single person I talked to, I didn't talk to everybody, I would talk to like this teacher or this relative that I had a good relationship with, or a friend, and they'd all be like, nobody could give me any answers. And then finally, my aunt said to me, why don't you talk to him? And I looked in the corner of the room, and sitting there was the rabbi, our rabbi. And he was like 100 years old. Seriously, he had a long beard. Just whatever you envision for a rabbi, that was him, okay? And I thought, but it was like the end of the line for me. Kind of like going to talk to a priest. And so I just poured out my heart to him, and he just sat there silently. And then he said 3 words I'll never forget. He said, I don't know. I don't know what happens when we die. I don't know why God allows bad things to happen to good people. And that just infuriated me even more, because I thought, if you don't know and you represent my faith to me, who does know? And I just remember being so angry and so frustrated. And in that moment, I think deciding with, a year and a half of high school to go, just like, I'm on my own here. My parents can't care for me in the way I need to be cared for. My sister is going through her own stuff. My little brother is having a hard time. And I don't know where God is. I don't even know if he exists. So I kind of was on survival mode the next year and a half in college. I put my head down, and I thought, I'm going to study really hard so I can get into a really good school and get out of the house and go away from home. And I'm going to make something of my life because I don't know how long I have. It's funny when someone close to you dies when they're younger, it kind of puts everything in a certain perspective. And then, so I would do that during the week, play sports and just study really hard. And then on the weekends, I would just do stuff to forget my pain. I would go to concerts, I would party, I would hang out with guys. I just was like in this mode of like, I just need to forget. There's more to say about that, but I think you guys know what I mean. So not a good space to be in at all. And really didn't even think God existed, and if he did, it wasn't relevant to me because clearly he didn't care. So lots of distractions. So about, beginning of junior year, I got this idea in my head that I was going to go to the University of Michigan. I had no idea why. I didn't know anyone who was there. I think they had a good football team back then. But it was a good university, it was big, it was far enough away from home, and so my sister and I were super excited. We both applied to Michigan. And a weird thing happened. We had spent our whole life together, same room, same friends, same clothes, and I got in and she didn't. I don't know if it was a clerical error, I don't know. I'm definitely not smarter than her. I don't know if they only wanted one of us. Conspiracy to break up twins, I'm not sure. But here we were for the first time facing life without one another. And so I was pretty shy, actually. And so I packed up all my stuff. I didn't even visit Michigan. That's how desperate I was to get away from home to go to school. I didn't even visit. I'm like, I'm going. Back in the day, they didn't put your name in a computer and match you with somebody who was a lot like you. If you didn't have a name of someone you were going to school with, to room with, you just got whoever they gave you. So we packed up my stuff. My sister and I divided up everything we owned, down to the last pair of socks. And my parents drove me up to Michigan in 4 hours, drove me to my dorm. I was in a dorm on North Campus called Bursley. And I thought, well, I'm just going to meet Jewish girls on my floor. So before I even check into my room, I'm walking up and down the hall, and it was a freshman hallway, so they had all the names on the doors, and I'm like, there's no Jewish girls on this floor. You're probably wondering how I knew. just no, okay? There were no Jewish names. So I go into my room, and I knew my roommate's name was Lori Brown. And I thought, that's definitely not a Jewish name. She lived like 40 minutes away, and she had already been there for a day, so her side of the room was set up. And wait, before I finish the story, I want to show you a funny picture, because you guys are going to laugh. This is a part of me you've never seen. Me as a teenage girl, okay? So which one am I?
The one on the left.
The one on the left?
Yeah.
Wait, actually,
I mean, look at those abs right now. Let's check it out. The shorts with the fringe, like the cutoffs. Everything comes back around, I'm telling you, right? I'm not sure which one I am either. I think I am the one on the left, though.
Yeah, I think the one on the right is definitely your twin's eyes.
Yeah. So anyway, I just thought you guys would get a kick out of that.
Also, Debbie's scandalous belly shirt.
I think it's just the way I'm standing. So back to Michigan, I walk into the room, I'm kind of shy, Lori's got her whole stuff set up, and I don't know anything about her except I know she's not Jewish, and so I'm like, going over to make some casual conversation, and she has a picture on her dresser, like, picture, and I remember it was a guy with long brown hair and a beard and warm eyes, and I remember like, hey, he's kind of cute. Is he your boyfriend? Can you get a picture, please? If you'd like to hold that. Yeah, that really happened. Beach Boy Jesus. And she looked at me really strangely and was probably thinking, you got into school here? And she was like, do you know who that is? And I said, no. And she said, well, his name is Jesus, and he is my boyfriend. And she didn't say like Jesus, like, She said, his name is Jesus. And all I knew about Jesus was that it was off limits. I didn't know really anything about him. I just knew Jesus and Christianity were off limits to me. So here's what I found out about Lori Brown. This is an autographed copy, by the way. Jesus signed it on the back. Lori was a Catholic girl, grew up Catholic, and when she was a senior in high school, she got invited to this class or course at her church called a Life in the Spirit seminar. And at that course, she began to dive deeper into her faith, and she actually met the person of Jesus. And she came to the University of Michigan, which I think you all know is very liberal and very secular, really determined to live her Catholic faith. And so here I am, this Jewish girl that's never met a Christian, doesn't know anything about Jesus except it's all off limits, and I get put in this tiny dorm room with Lori and boyfriend Jesus. So I will say Lori was pretty cool about not like trying to talk to me about it. She was really trying to live it. But there was another girl that lived down the hall. Her name was Sarah, and she was what I would call a Jesus freak, okay? Which really was a term back then. She played guitar, and she'd walk up and down the halls, and she'd like knock on people's doors and be like, hey, want to hear a song about Jesus? And the weirdest thing was that she and I became fast friends. We had one thing in common, and that was sports. We were both athletic, and so we ended up getting on some intramural sports teams. We ended up going to the gym to work out together, and I want to tell you, I knew she had this Jesus thing going. I didn't really know what it was, but she was one of the most authentic people I had met up to that point at Michigan. She clearly believed in something that was very important to her, and she didn't care about what other people thought about her. And I don't know, I think subconsciously there's something in me that was really drawn to that, and to that kind of friend. So we became friends. Once in a while we'd have debates from the Old Testament and the New Testament. I didn't know what I was talking about. She was a Catholic. I don't think she knew really that much. She was working on her scripture, but she was very, very devoted to the Lord. all right, so fast forward a few months, I'm into my classes. I'm taking a great books, I'm an English major, great books class, and we're reading things from the first and second century, which is, by the way, when the church began to grow. And so one day the professor comes and he says, I want you all to read the book of Romans and to do an essay on it. So I go to him after class and I'm like, hey, I don't have the book of Romans, it wasn't on the book list. And he looks at me, kind of like Lori did with Jesus, but she looks at me and is like, that's in the New Testament. And I said, well, I'm not allowed to have one of those. And he said, I don't care, find a Christian Bible and do the assignment. So I went down to my friend Sarah's room because I had seen that she had a Bible. Jews don't have their own personal Bibles, and because they read scripture in synagogue. And I said, hey, I have this assignment. I'm supposed to read Romans. I don't know what it is or where it is. She's like, I have a Bible. You can borrow my Bible. I'll help you with the assignment. I'm like, whoa, slow down. I just need to borrow your Bible. So she gives me her Bible. This is it, to borrow. And she puts a little ribbon in. She says, this is where Romans is. Let me know if you need help. So I take it back to my room. I open up to Romans. I start to read. I'm like, I don't know what's going on here. I still don't know what's going on in Romans. But I don't know who Jesus is. I don't know who Paul is. I don't know what's happening. And I was like, I'm not doing this assignment. I'm not getting into this anymore. And then, but I started to kind of flip through her Bible because I had never met anyone that actually owned their own Bible. Her name is actually like on the front in gold letters. And I started to flip through it and I was just kind of amazed because looking at it, it said a couple really important things to me. One is that she actually read this, and I'm going to show you why in a second. Natalie, can you come up and hold the mic for me? I can show you guys this. Actually, I can probably do this with this probably. Sorry, for a minute I thought there were 1,000 people in here. So I was just kind of flipping through it, and I'm like, whoa, check this out, you guys. This is like 1 Peter, and she like underlined all of 1 Peter. Same with Ephesians, the whole thing, and then she would write in the margins, and she'd write prayer requests and prayer answers, and she ran out of room, so she wrote on the back and the maps, and this was like a well-used Bible. You can tell it's falling apart. This is her stuff, not mine. Look at, yeah, here's 1 Peter again. She was really into the coming of the Lord, I don't know. And Ephesians. And I'm kind of flipping through it. I'm not even reading like what's here. I'm just like absorbing the fact that this word, these words are speaking to her heart. And there's like a conversation or a dialogue happening between her and this. And I was at the point, honestly, like, yeah, my scriptures are here at the beginning, right? The Old Testament. I didn't believe any of this. I thought it was just made up stuff. And not only did she believe all of this, but it was actually shaping the way she thought, the way she spoke, and the way she acted. And I remember just feeling this like weird sensation, like if I held on to this book too long and actually read it, it would like almost like cast a spell on me. Or have some weird influence on me. It wasn't until much later when I actually started reading the New Testament, I came across a scripture which kind of described what I experienced that day, and it is from Hebrews, and it says, the Word of God is living and active. It's sharper than any two-edged sword, able to cut through the intentions of the heart. And I thought, all right, it's got to go back to you because I don't want this book around. I don't even know if I did the assignment or not, but this was my first window into somebody's relationship with God. All right, we're going to keep fast forwarding, okay? So I'm not going to bore you with all the details of my freshman year in college. Except one cool thing, my roommate Lori worked at the movie theater. And so at the end of every shift on Saturday night, she brought home a bag of popcorn that was like this big, buttered. She was definitely my favorite roommate. But around February or March of my freshman year, it was Lent. I didn't know it was Lent, but you'll understand why I say that. Sarah and a group of girls came to my door and they said, we're watching a movie in the lounge. Do you want to take a study break? So the lounge was like half the size of this room. It was carpeted and there was like a TV, not a flat screen, okay? They weren't invented yet, but there was a TV here and they were going to be showing a movie in like 3 different parts over the course of the next 3 or 4 days. So I said, sure. So I come in, there's a bunch of girls. I sit down on the floor next to my friend Sarah, and I'm like, what movie is this? And she's like, really evasive. She's like, oh, it's nothing. And I'm like, getting suspicious. And then all of a sudden, the movie comes on, and like, it's like, Jesus of Nazareth. And I was like, oh crap, I gotta get out of here. I always felt my grandfather was gonna know everything I was doing. But I thought, I'm not allowed to be here, I need to leave. But I was so like shy and cared too much about what other people would think that I stayed. And I sat there and I watched as this movie unfolds. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's a pretty old version. Who's seen Jesus of Nazareth? Anybody? Okay. Jesus in it never blinks. He's just like... Go watch it sometime, especially after I share my story with you. So, I'm gonna make sure I have. Okay. So I'm sitting there and watching as this like really confusing scene with it, you know, the angel appearing, and I had no idea. I'm like, I don't know what these special effects are, but I don't know what's going on here. But I'm watching as Jesus is born, and then he grows up, and he's a boy. And he begins to do all these Jewish things, right? He goes to the synagogue. He listens to his mother. That's a very Jewish thing. He goes to the temple. All these Jewish things. And I remember leaning over to my friend Sarah, another embarrassing moment in my life. And I said to her, he's Jewish. And she's like, yeah. And I thought, wow, best kept secret ever. You guys know Jesus is Jewish, right? Okay. I didn't know that. Like, nobody told me. It was like Jesus was a Christian, you know, and I wasn't allowed to like know who he was. And so here I'm watching this Hollywood movie, and my whole life I've been taught that Jesus is off limits, and all of a sudden I'm like, but he's family. Like he's doing what we do. And so I was kind of got drawn into the story, and then all of a sudden Jesus begins his public ministry, and I'm watching him as he begins to relate to different people, and I'm just blown away. And I want to tell you, this is how God can work through anything. He can work through a cheesy Hollywood movie, and he began to work in my heart. And I had a lot of shame in my life as a young woman, and I watched as Jesus began to relate to women and the way he was able to love them even in their sin, to speak the truth in love. And I don't know how to describe it to you, except there was something about this person of Jesus, not the Hollywood character, but this person of Jesus that began to draw me in. So it was getting to the end of the first part, and there was a scene in the movie where Jesus comes to a town, and he's met at the town by a woman who begins to weep. And then her sister joins her. And they both say to Jesus, Lord, where were you? If you had been here, our brother would not have died. And I sat there and I thought, are you kidding? This is like the script from my own life. That's what I said to God a few years ago when my brother died. And that was Martha and Mary talking about Lazarus. And so everything in me wanted to just run out of the room right there. It's like when you're just starting to heal a little bit from a bad wound, and somebody comes and just like rips off the Band-Aid, and you're like, oh man, this hurts. All that pain, all that questioning just came back to me. And honestly, as I sat there and watched that scene, I felt like this invisible hand was just holding me to the carpet, and I could not move. And I watched as Jesus goes to the tomb of where Lazarus is buried. You know the story, right? I didn't know the story. But I knew Jesus shouldn't be there because the dead are considered ritually unclean for the Jews. And I watched as he goes forth and he calls his friend out of the tomb. And he unbinds him. And I sat there having this almost like out-of-body experience, and I thought, who is this man? Could he be the one? And when I say the one, what do I mean, Catherine?
The Messiah.
Could he be the Messiah? Could it be that the Messiah has power over life and over death? And I went back to my room that night, and I could not sleep. I remember it was like 1 a.m, and I walked all the way down my hall to my friend Sarah's room, and I just knocked on her door like this. I didn't say anything. She didn't say anything. She just opened her door like this wide, and she just put out her Bible like this. She was ready. And so I took it back to my room, and I opened it up to that little ribbon, and for the first time I read not a Hollywood version, but the gospel versions of the life of Jesus Christ. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And I got to the part in John where Jesus says, the scene I had just watched, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will never die, but the one who believes in me will live forever. I didn't know what most of those words meant, but I thought there's a promise hidden here. And so for the second time in my life, I just, in my dorm room, my roommate was sleeping up on her loft, and I just got down on my knees and I just said, God, I don't know if you're real. I don't know who this man Jesus is. But if he's the Messiah, show me and give me the faith to believe. Nothing happened. But again, like having this Bible in my hand before, God began to open like little cracks of light in my own heart. And that's where hope began to come in. And so I went to Sarah the next day, and I said, here's your Bible back. And she said, why don't you keep it? It was all, we had like 3 more weeks till the end of the school year. Before I was going home for the summer, she said, why don't you keep it and why don't you read it? And so I did. I began to read the Gospels. I began to read what Jesus said. I began to read the Old Testament scriptures about who the Messiah was going to be. And then I went home that summer, and with a flashlight under my covers, I began to really dive into the scriptures, and every night I prayed that prayer, asking God to reveal himself to me. And I knew being at home for the summer doing it was a dangerous venture, because my family would not approve at all. So, what time is adoration? Just want to, anyone know?
7, do you know what time? 7:30.
7:50. All right, I'll speed it up. How you guys doing? Okay? Need a stretch break?
No, we're good.
Water snack? Okay. Okay. So I go home for the summer, I come back in the fall, and I said to my friend Sarah, if Jesus was a Jew and he was the Messiah, why aren't there other Jewish people that believe in him? Like today, not like back then. And she said, oh, there are, and I actually know a girl who's a friend who's Jewish. Her name is Abby. Do you want to meet her? And I said no. Because I was very suspicious of being like converted or set up, and I wasn't looking to convert. I just wanted truth. And I wanted this ache in my heart to go away. And so I was going to synagogue that next week for the High Holy Days. Anyone know what those are? The holiest days of the year for Jews? You're right. What were you saying? Yeah, the Day of Atonement. Yeah, Yom Kippur, and yeah, 2 for 2. Good job. Get yourself a free decal. All right. And I was finishing up, and we was all students, and have you been around U of M at all? Anyone know U of M campus? You know where the Union is? It's huge. Right on State Street there. Coming out there with tons of other Jewish kids, and I literally like bump into this girl because there's so many, and we start walking through campus together. We're just chatting and whatever, and then we get to the part where I have to go get on the bus, and she's got to go to her dorm, and she stops and she says, "Hey, it's really great to talk. I just want to tell you my name is Abby," and yeah, and she goes, I grew up in Connecticut. My grandfather's a rabbi, and when I was 17, my best friend fell in love, and she introduced me to this guy, this amazing man, and his name was Jesus. And I just want you to know that I'm a Jew who believes in Jesus. And I was like, is this a setup? And she's like, no, it wasn't. But this is how God was working, you know. Jews are, stiff-necked and hard-headed, so I needed lots of signs. So I'm praying every night, that prayer that I told you. I'm trying to read the scriptures. I'm trying to kind of figure out what's true and what isn't. And I go home for Thanksgiving, sophomore year now. And I beat my sister home by a number of hours. So I was out for dinner with my parents at a Chinese restaurant, and I'm like, hey, this is what I'm learning in college. Did you ever think Jesus could be the Messiah? And I look over, and my mom is like choking on her egg roll, and my dad says, we need to go now. So we leave the restaurant, we go home, and my dad calls up these two married couple who are work associates. They're Catholics, and he says, we think our daughter's converting. You need to come over right now and talk her out of it. So this Catholic couple comes over. By this time, my mom is crying, and it's just like, it's so tense, and there's so much drama going on. And they sit down with me, and they're like, what are you doing? You don't need to convert. You're Jewish. God loves the Jewish people. You don't need to believe in Jesus. And so I'm going to cut them some slack, because clearly they didn't know Jesus. But for the next number of hours, they tried to talk me out of it, and it was just like, it was so difficult. But I've been reading in Scripture about whoever does not hate father, mother, sister, brother for my sake is not worthy to follow me. There's a cost involved here. And I was just, that weekend was like an understanding of the tremendous cost of acknowledging that Jesus was the Messiah. And so my dad begged me on Sunday not to go back to school, not to convert, and I'm just like, I was kind, but I was like, I'm not making promises that I can't keep. A few days later, beginning of December, I'm sleeping. Imagine me sleeping with my long tresses, and I have a dream. And in the dream, I hear this voice call out to me. I'm standing in this long, dark hallway, and I hear a voice call out to me, who do you say that I am? And I couldn't see anyone. And then a second time that voice called out to me and said, who do you say that I am? And I saw just the outliner shape, like you can see somebody in the hall, but I couldn't see who they were. And I said, I don't know who you are. And then a third time, who do you say that I am? And in the dream, I saw Jesus standing right in front of me. And I said, you're Jesus, you're Jesus, you're Jesus. And I woke up from the dream. It was so vivid. Have you guys ever had a dream that's super vivid? So I'm going to the gym in the morning to meet my friend Sarah, and I'm like, I had this dream. And I explained it to her, and I said, do you think there's anything to it? And she was like, yes. And I said, you know what? It's too hard. Like, I've done my homework. Like, I've studied the Bible. I believe Jesus was a historical person. I believe he was an important religious person. I believe he may have even been the Messiah. But I don't have the faith in here to believe it. I could lose everything. I could lose my family. I could lose my reputation. And I need to know that he is who he says he is. Do you know the difference between knowing and knowing? I had this knowing, but I didn't have this knowing. Okay? And so she said something very wise. She said, keep praying, keep seeking, keep asking. And so I continued to do that for a few days, and one night I was sitting up on my loft in my dorm room, Bursley, in front of a big, picture window, and I prayed that prayer that I'd been praying for 9 months. And I said, God, if you're real, if Jesus is the Messiah, show me and give me the faith to believe. And that night, I kid you not, something supernatural happened. So much so that I don't quite know how to put words around it, but that night, I experienced this tremendous light and presence in the room with me. And I knew something supernatural was happening. And I remember feeling really afraid because I thought, I have messed up my life. And I remember saying, God, if this is you, I've broken a lot of your commandments. That would be the 10 plus, okay? And I said, and I don't know who you are, but if you give me another chance, I want to know you, and I want to live my life for you. And as soon as I prayed that prayer, that same Jesus I had seen in the dream, I saw, I don't know if it was a vision or what, but he was in the room with me. And he was standing there like this, holding out his hand, and I could hear him speaking, not in an audible voice, but in my heart, and he was saying, here, this is for you. And I couldn't see what he was holding in his hand, but he said, you prayed for it and you asked for it. This is faith, and it's a gift. And in that moment of Jesus reaching his hand out to me with that gift of faith, I don't know how to say it except I just knew that I knew that I knew it was true. Not it was true, that he was truth, that he was the way, the truth, and the life. I knew that he loved me. I hadn't even gotten to the book of Revelation, guys. Like, I didn't know everything there was to know. I wasn't making a totally rational decision. I was making a decision, not an emotional decision, but a decision of my will from my heart. That gift of faith enabled me to say yes. And so I just said, God, I believe that you love me and you have a plan for my life, and I'm in big trouble. And I just experienced God like a perfect gentleman holding the door open to me and saying, I'm not going to force you, but this is the life I have for you if you choose it. And so that night, on December 3rd, in my dorm room, I said yes. I want it. I don't know what. I want you. I don't know what this life is going to look like, but I want to walk by faith in you, and I want a new beginning. And so that night was really not the end of my story, but really the beginning. I stayed in Ann Arbor that summer. I told my parents why I was staying. They hired a private investigator. They thought I was in a cult. They thought I was being brainwashed. Sometimes I'd look around and someone was following me. I had to go see all these different rabbis all over town, and they were pretty concerned. I stayed in Ann Arbor. I was baptized that summer in a swimming pool at Clay Junior High. Go Clay. I wasn't a Catholic. I was just like a believer in Jesus, and began to grow in my faith. And I felt like this honeymoon phase. I'd get on the bus from my dorm to go to class, and it was like me and Jesus on the bus, speaking to me and leading me and guiding me. I'd come back from my dorm at night, and there'd be girls outside the door wanting prayer and wanting to talk about Jesus. So something was happening. And I just began to fall more in love with Jesus, and my family began to move further apart. My mom didn't really want to talk to me. They didn't come to visit. If I wanted to see them, I had to go there. I wasn't allowed to talk about my faith or my decisions with them. And so it became even more so very superficial relating with my family. And it was very painful, but also very affirming, because I thought I must be doing something right, because this is what Jesus talks about, that it's hard to follow him. Is this what it feels like to pick up a cross and follow him? So I'm going to fast forward a lot. I had a number of years of just, I graduated from Michigan. I went to grad school for a year at Michigan for my master's in history, and also worked part-time doing ministry on campus with University Christian Outreach, and doing writing, and then did some full-time ministry. Some of you might not know this, but I spent some time in the hood. Well, not that hood. I spent some time, like 4.5 years at the Servants of God's Love, which is Sister Sarah Burdick's order. And the Sarah, whose Bible this is, became a nun. Her name is Sister Sarah Burdick. How many of you know Sister Sarah from FGR? Okay, some of you do. You girls know Sister Sarah?
I didn't know that was the Sarah.
The Sarah, yeah. I'm so grateful that she's crazy. She's still crazy. She's still crazy. She's the one that refs the Powder Puff games and always
It's all coming together.
yeah, it's all coming together. So when she made her final vows with the sister, she said, I want you to have this Bible, because this is more part of your story than it is mine. And whenever you share your story, take it with you. And so I've tried to do that. My oldest daughter is named Sarah. And I think all my kids have had her at FGR, which has been such a blessing. So I began to serve the Lord and just grow in my faith and was discerning. I wasn't Catholic, but I was like, hey, I just love Jesus. I want to give my whole life to him. Maybe I won't get married. Wasn't like there were a lot of guys knocking on my door anyway. But just had that time of formation. And then a new guy came to town. You know what his name was? Very good. You guys are smart. Okay, yeah. He had just left the seminary, and he was working for University Christian Outreach, as was I, and we became good friends. And then he called me one day and said, I'm going to tell you this story because it's funny. He said, meet me at the park. This is the summer. We were both leading houses I had a household of young women who were in college, and he had guys who were in college. And so I went to the park, and it was very sweet. He pulled out his wallet, and he had $2 in his wallet. And he put them on the grass, these $2 bills. Is this being recorded?
Yeah.
Cut this part. And a picture of his family. He's one of 7 kids, and he said, I don't have a lot of money to my name, and these are the people that matter the most to me. But I don't know, it's something really cheesy, like I think you're really special. And he basically said, I want to get to know you, and I want to pursue a relationship with you. And I said, I was not surprised, but he said, I want to tell you one thing. I'm Catholic, and being Catholic is very important to me, and I really want to marry someone who's Catholic. And I said, well, I'm not Catholic. And he said, I know that, but I want to bring that to you. And I said, well, I'm not going to pursue this. I'm not going to become Catholic just to be with you. And I wasn't being sassy about it or mean. I was just I've already sacrificed so much, and I'm not going to just become something for the sake of convenience unless I understand what it is, and I know that God is inviting me into that. So we made a deal. Those of you that know at least about my husband, the whole time I've ever known him, he's a Catholic evangelist. So this is his job, is to convince people that the Catholic Church is the way to go. And I'm like, you're not talking to me about that. So we made a deal. I said, I will pursue the Catholic Church, and you can't talk to me about it, and then we'll come back together and decide if this is something the Lord has for us. So I began to meet with a priest. His name was Father Frank McGrath. He's, some of you may probably know, none of you know him. He was an amazing tennis player. We played tennis together a lot, and he began privately just to walk me through things. And there were things I didn't even know how to ask about the Catholic Church. But one day during Advent, this was December, early December, I felt like the Lord said to me in prayer, I want to introduce you to Mary. And I said, Mary who? She was not on my radar, really. I knew she was the mother of Jesus. And so I went to my meeting with the Father that day, and he said, I've been praying for you, and the Lord told me he wants you to meet his mother. So I'm like, I confirm that. So I'll tell you what I didn't do. I didn't run out and get a rosary or a book about Mary. I just went to the scriptures. And I looked for Mary in the scriptures. And one of the places I found her very specifically speaking to my heart was in the Visitation, where Mary, this young Jewish girl who's been rejected by her family, goes to be with Elizabeth in her time of need. And my mom wasn't in my life at that time, and it was a significant time. And I felt like as I read that story, Mary was saying to me, I know what it means to be a young Jewish woman, to be alone and rejected by your family, but I want to come and be with you in your time of need. And so Mary just began to walk with me on this journey, and I began to go to Mass and sit in the back, and I'd watch what was happening. People would get up and reverence God's word, and I'm like, they got that from the Jews. Or one day I was there, and the bishop was there for some reason. He was wearing a yarmulke, and I'm like, they got that from the Jews. And so I began to study what the church was teaching, but I began to study more particularly the Eucharist. And I knew a lot about the Passover because I'd grown up celebrating the Passover, and it's like all the dots began to connect for me. And so I came into the church on Palm Sunday, and then Peter and I were married 3 weeks later. We were married in, you can show the picture. We were married in a hotel because my parents wouldn't come if we got married in a church. They brought 250 of their closest Jewish friends to Ann Arbor. We got married in a hotel under a chuppah, that's a canopy there. And when it was time to say our wedding vows, we said them in Hebrew, and then we said the Catholic vows, and in the Hebrew ceremony, your parents are right with you under there. And so it was, it was very tense until the bar opened. It was a very tense wedding. But it was a beautiful day as well, and we decided to build bridges with our family instead of tearing them down. So, so I think you guys don't see them around a lot except Rachel, but I have 4 kids now, the relationships with my family have gotten healed significantly. It's a whole other story. No one believes in Jesus yet, but at least a lot of healing happened as well. And now we have 12 little grandchildren as well. So, so I'm going to stop here because I've been talking for a long time. You guys are doing a great job listening. And perhaps I'll say one more thing. The reason that I felt so called to do ministry with young women is because that was a really difficult time in my own life, but also a time when God revealed himself very powerfully to me. And so all those questions that I had, he's the yes. He's in all of that. So that's what I feel passionate about, is helping you guys figure that out and to really encounter him personally. So if anyone has a burning question, great. If not, we can kind of move on, or you can grab me later. No questions? No. Anyone? Do you have a question, or are you just going like this?